Hello, everybody. How's it going? I didn't think I'd be doing one of these 2 days after doing the last one. I've been doing them like once every 3 or 4 weeks, I think. But we got our BMYRT lawsuit. So how could I not come on here to talk about BMYRT when I have the opportunity? And I also want to do a little bit more on IVMT because a little bit's changed in a good way in the last 24 hours. So let's start with BMYRT. I assume people have seen this. You could find it on Twitter if you haven't seen the lawsuit. I will give you a link to that right now. If you're on this YouTube, I'm sure you've seen this. But why not give you a link? And sorry about this. Here is the link. So what I think is really interesting about this lawsuit is the word COVID is not mentioned one time in the entire lawsuit. So either the lawyers plan on introducing evidence that of New York law that COVID is a part of the reason why we're owed our $9, or they've decided they're going to completely stick to the diligent effort focus and just let the fact that COVID delayed it become irrelevant. That if Bristol didn't get a major amendment and didn't mess up all the plants, then it would be approved on time, and it's irrelevant that there was COVID. So I want to talk about that in detail. But first, before I get to that, I got to turn off my notifications. Hold on 1 second. Sorry about this. I get very distracted when things pop up on my screen. The second part that was really interesting to me, and we're going to go through each of the things that Bristol has alleged to have done, but the trustees also suing Bristol because Bristol failed to let them see the books and records upon request at the end of December, which is before the CVR expired. And it's in the charter of the CVR that the trustee is allowed to examine the books and records whenever they want to. I think that's pretty interesting that Bristol refused to play along at all. And in theory, if a judge believes that Bristol broke the agreement just on that they refused to comply with the books and records request, we can get paid $9 just because of that. Don't have to actually even prove that they failed the diligence efforts clause because they broke the contract by not letting the trustee examine the books and records. So I thought that was really interesting. Regarding the COVID thing, I mean, basically this whole lawsuit, and this is only 35 pages, so there probably would be a more comprehensive amendments as we get closer. I mean, just to remind you all, there won't actually go to trial for years. There would be first, Bristol's going to try to get it thrown out, and it won't get thrown out, and then there will be discovery, and hopefully we just get a settlement. But the actual court date, it could be 3 years from now, 4 years from now. So a lot will happen between now and then. Bristol and the trustee and the lawyers haven't even gotten the books and records requests they needed. So how are they possibly supposed to prepare a lawsuit if they don't have access to any of the information that they need to know whether or not Bristol actually fulfilled its diligent efforts in the CVR? Kind of question here. Was this the first time you heard about not sharing their books? Yeah, I mean, I was told that they hadn't been very helpful and they were kind of ignoring the trustee, but I didn't know that they went out of their way to actually break the terms of the CVR by ignoring the trustee. So regarding the books and records, I thought they were just ignoring the trustee with regards to thinking that the CVR was dead. I also didn't know the trustee put in the books and records request before December 31st when the CVR was still alive. So that surprised me. What also surprised me was, and I don't know how they got this, but they had a lot of specific information about why they think Bristol-Myers did not fulfill their diligent efforts. For instance, we finally get to know why there was a major amendment. I guess it was redacted in the FDA filing after Lysocell was approved, but it says here that the momentum toward approval that Celgene built was lost after Bristol-Myers assumed control. Bristol-Myers failed to use diligent efforts to achieve those milestones, and the FDA approval process for Lysocell and Ida-cel began to suffer setbacks. Bristol-Myers made a highly atypical decision to exclude critical and mandatory information in its initial filing of the Lysocell BLA. It excluded data on critical tests needed to demonstrate the safety and efficacy of Lysocell. Bristol-Myers also withheld details concerning the procedures it used to ensure the tests were valid. Because of this, and now I'm just ad-libbing, the major amendment was deemed, and the PDUFA date was moved back from August 17th to November 17th. Okay, so your first pushback to Bristol-Myers will be this. You're right. We never get major amendments, but this was just an accident. And guess what? November 17th was still well in the realm of getting this approved by January 1st. If it wasn't for COVID, they would have inspected in time for the November 17th PDUFA date. And both facilities would have been inspected, and they would have had a decision. Now, the pushback to that, and I think there's a really valid case to be made here. If the PDUFA date remained August 17th, there is a very, very high likelihood that the Lonza facility would have been inspected much earlier than that first week of December. And that's because when FDA, first of all, FDA was always doing critical need inspections. But when the FDA decided to renew more inspections in the end of July, this would have been a priority since they just missed the PDUFA date on this. And my guess is the Lonza facility would have been inspected in September or in August, not in December. And I think a judge or a jury would reasonably conclude that as well. So you can't really use COVID as an excuse if you believe that they messed up the filing. And the other very, very interesting point I learned in this, can't speak English sometimes, that I learned in this document was there is a chart. I have to find this. I should have taken better notes. This is what you guys get. You don't pay me anything, so I don't actually come prepared. I'm winging it these days. They talk about how with the other two CAR-Ts, how many fewer interactions they had with the FDA, how many fewer back and forths. I just want to get the exact quote because I think this is really interesting. Oh, I have it here. I don't know what I'm doing. I have it over here. Sorry, team. Hold on. So listen to this. Yescarta, Kymriah, and Tecartus moved through the FDA approval process with substantially more ease. Now, Tecartus didn't need an inspection. So that would be Bristol-Myers pushback there. But this part's great. Neither Gilead nor Novartis submitted a major amendment to any BLA. Overall, each submitted 40 to 80% fewer amendments to their respective BLAs than Bristol-Myers submitted for Lysocell. And although Yescarta and Kymriah received Form 483s, no responses were reported as containing, quote, unclear and questionable points, nor are there any reports that the FDA requested additional responses to the Yescarta or Kymriah Form 483s because initial responses were deficient. So that has nothing to do with COVID. You can say that these are two other comps for CAR-Ts, and in fact, Bristol-Myers should have learned so much from those two Form 483s for Yescarta and Kymriah that they should have been in a better position to respond with Lysocell than either of those two were. Those were groundbreaking new indications, new novel drugs, and of course they're going to have mistakes. But 3 years later, you think Bristol-Myers would have been able to make sure that anything that went wrong with Yescarta or Kymriah, that it wouldn't go wrong with Lysocell. So that's an actual data point that I think, really has a lot of meat in it. The other thing that will have less meat in it is they compare how many days it takes to get approved for Kymriah and Yescarta versus Lysocell. Bristol-Myers is just going to say the reason why it took so long is because of COVID. It had nothing to do with our deficiencies. All in all, I think that they do a pretty good job at summing up that there was gross incompetence. I mean, they even used the RTF in Ida-cel to show that they were slowing down the process with both of those drugs. And they were throwing wrenches into wheels And at some point, if they got lucky with a wrench sticking, then, they would make out. Now, I'm not so certain that they would have been that upset if one of the two drugs got a CRL, because the net present value of either of those drugs is not worth $6.2 billion. So, I've done a lot of these with BMYRT. And do I think that Bristol Myers had a meeting where they, went out of their way to say we need to sabotage these drugs? I do not. Do I think that there is all sorts of tea leaves that say that they did not take these drugs as serious as they've taken every other drug they've ever got approval for? I think there is. There's never been a major amendment or an RTF, I think, in the last 10 years, if not longer, at Bristol Myers, and they both got that. So where do we go from here? Bristol Myers tries to get this thrown out, and they won't. And we see what happens. I'm still of the belief that Bristol Myers does not want this to go to trial. It definitely doesn't want discovery. And it's just a question of what they're willing to pay, and then what the steering committee is willing to accept. I think this, I'm basing this on nothing. I think today the steering committee would take $5 or $6. And I think Bristol Myers would probably pay $2 or $3, maybe $2. So there's a huge gap between the two. And I don't see it changing unless Bristol Myers is aware of a smoking gun that will come out during discovery. And only Bristol Myers knows that, because they won't give us any of their books and records. So that's BMYRT. Any questions? It doesn't have to be long. It last traded at like $1.45. I think I told you guys $1.40 or $1.45 for fully funded CVRs. So that includes the 7 cents already paid up front. All right, and let me talk a little bit about IMVT. So the two other things I want to talk about IMVT. Well, first of all, there was an article on endpoints that came out. There's an article on endpoints that came out. It came out 2 days ago, and I missed it. And I'm going to tweet it to you guys here. We'll let the dog out first. I think there's a couple really interesting things here. So first of all, in this article, a Roivant spokesperson is quoted twice, okay? And the first thing the Roivant spokesperson says is that, a quote, a Roivant spokesperson confirmed that these were the data that prompted the company to, in an SEC filing on March 8th, that as a controlling shareholder, they had access to confidential information and were considering buying out the remaining shares of the former subsidiary Premium. This isn't important, but I'm going to read it anyway. Baird's Brian Scorney later estimated the premium could be as high as 70%, or $2.6 billion for a company that, after its stock traded over the winter, had a market cap of around $1.5 billion. By the way, right now the market cap is $1 billion. So Scorney thought it could go for $2.6 billion versus $1 billion now. And the Roivant spokesperson is telling us that they were aware of all of the information that blew the stock up yesterday. And this is what the 13D said, okay? The 13D said, and I quote, sorry about this, guys. Here it is. Oh, before I do this, I want to read the other quote from the Roivant spokesperson. Our view is that this makes us competitive in every indication set of Immunovant's low-dose data. Okay, this is what the 13D said. And I want to remind you that the day they filed this 13D, the day before it closed at, I think, 1350. And the day before that, it was 1450. And then before that, it was like 15 to 17. So at the absolute lowest point of any time after it blew up from 50, they put a D out. 1350 was where it closed at. And this is what the D said. Roivant intends to propose to the issuer that Roivant and the issuer evaluate a potential transaction pursuant to which Roivant or an affiliate would acquire all of the issued and outstanding shares of common stock of the issuer. not currently owned by Roivant. Roivant expects that any potential transaction would be at a per share price representing a premium to current trading levels, consistent with similar precedent transactions in the life industry involving acquisitions of minority interest by majority shareholders, with the mix of cash or equity consideration to be mutually determined by Roivant and the issuer. Roivant is evaluating a potential public listing that would take effect prior to the consummation of any transaction with the issuer. As the issuer's controlling shareholder, Roivant has received non-public information about the issuer and its lead product candidate. No assurance can be made, yada, yada, yada. Lot to unpack there. But we now know from what the spokesperson just told us that when they thought they were going to make an offer for Immunovant, they were going to pay a premium consistent with majority acquiring a minority company, a stake in a company at premium levels to current trading levels of that D. Okay. Typically, when a minority gets acquired by a majority, they can pay up to 100% premium. It's almost never less than 50% in a biotech. We've shown you 3 different transactions, and they're all in like the mid 70s, mid 80s percentages. That gets you to $21, $22 a share, and that's using the $13.50 as the reference price, which, as I said before, is a bullshit reference price. They can't just put a 13D out just because they want to and say, this is the new reference price, even though we have information you don't have. It would be like, I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say I run a company and all I do is I try to discover oil. I'm an E&P, and I currently have no producing oil fields. And I control the company, it's public, just like this. And we have a huge oil field that is currently being drilled, and we should know the next few months whether or not we hit oil or not. And right before we do that, I issue a press release and I tell you that we are halting drilling of the oil field because there's a chance the oil field is toxic, killing people or something. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go along. And the stock goes from 50 to 13.50. In the meantime, I'm told by my scientists that the oil is there, there's oil there, and the oil is abundant. It's going to make us all rich. But I haven't notified the market yet that. I can't put a 13D out the next day and say, I have possession of material information. I plan on buying out the minority at a premium to current prices and pay $19 or $20 for this when I know that the oil field is rich with oil. And I'm going to let the market know in a few months from now. That's exactly the analogy here. The only difference here and there is that once they told the market that the oil field was rich and abundant with oil, instead of the stock going up to $30 or $40 or $50, the stock went to $9.50. So Roivant and Immunovant clearly got it wrong what the market was, how the market was going to interpret this data. They thought there's a go forward process, a go forward plan. They can use lower dosages, and the cholesterol issue won't be a big deal, and that they can for acute indications, they can use a higher dose. Okay. My only point is, even with the 1350 being BS, you still get to $20, $21, $22. So today we're at 1050 or 1070 or whatever, which again is a bullshit price. Don't anchor to it. Doesn't mean anything. Okay. If anything, like I said 2 days ago, the price today, yesterday, the day before, Roivant's going to argue to the special committee is inflated, that it's only 1050 or 1075 because they said they were going to acquire them. And it's going to be very hard for them to convince the special committee or convince minority shareholders that this is only worth $13 or $14 or $15. That wouldn't even be a premium to when they put the D out. So there's only one cynical explanation about why you think Roivant will not acquire Immunovant. And the cynical explanation is that they only put that 13D out because they were in the middle of the SPAC transaction and they wanted to keep Immunovant stock from going any lower. It already went to 1350, and if it went to 8, that would make the SPAC transaction hard to happen. Okay, I think this is pretty far-fetched. It went from 50 to 1350. And then when they put the D out saying that they wanted to acquire them, you got to think the SPAC the pipe purchasers and the SPAC committee have to be imbeciles to not realize that the reason why Immunovant was trading at $15, $16 wasn't because of that 13D. So they were doing their own due diligence on the drug. In fact, they say in the background of the merger that they hired their own advisors and their own scientists to study the drug, and they had access to all the same material, non-public information that Roivant had, and that we just got told about, last week. You then have to believe that yesterday, after the company came out and said they've hired advisors and they've hired a law firm, and it's now been 4 months since that 13D, that Roivant's going to keep up this charade that they want to acquire the minority until they close the SPAC deal, even though the SPAC deal is not contingent on them acquiring the minority at all. And there's no material adverse clause that will be hit by this going to 5 or 6 or 7, because the issues at Immunovant were completely known to the pipe buyers and to the SPAC in May when they signed the deal. So the path you'd have to take between now and the next 6 months would be the SPAC closes sometime in the August, September timeframe is my guess. And then you get a press release that says Immunovant cannot agree with Roivant on a purchase price, and Immunovant's going to continue going along standalone company. Is that possible? Of course it's possible. Is it probable? I don't think it's probable. I think that Roivant needs Immunovant, and I think that Immunovant inside Roivant just makes so much more sense given the issues that Immunovant is dealing with right now. If it's part of a larger company and wholly owned inside, they could really take their time and do whatever they want from a time frame perspective and not be subject to the whims of what the market's going to do with this one drug company. And that's all this company is one drug. So I had a thought yesterday, which I like to share, which it says that they won't consummate this deal, until Roivant goes public. It does not say they won't announce the deal until Roivant goes public. And I have a way I think they can announce a deal very shortly, assuming they want to take advantage of the stock price being impaired. What they would do is they would come out, and they would have to do it pretty soon because the stock's already going up. So if they want to try to anchor on this low price, they would come out and they would say, they wouldn't say that maybe Immunovant's special committee has agreed to it, but they would say Roivant proposes $15 a share in cash and stock for every Immunovant share. The max cash will be $250 million, and the rest will be paid in stock. And they'll say that the stock portion of the deal will be decided on a ratio of the 10-day VWAP of whatever Roivant is trading at 10 days prior to the close of the Immunovant transaction. So a lot to unpack there, but let me explain what I mean. So let's say they announce this deal and they expect this deal to close in December 15th, we'll say. And it's $15 a share with $250 million in cash. Let's say $250 million in cash equals $5 a share in cash. It's about that, okay? The $10 in stock, $5 in cash. What they would say is from December 15th and the 10 business days prior to December 15th, they would take the trading stock of Roivant, which at that point has been de-SPACed, and they would see what the VWAP is each of the 10 days, and you would get that many shares on average to get $10 worth of Roivant for Immunovant. This helps Roivant in two ways. First, it, again, most importantly, lets them try to anchor on this low stock price right now, because the stock rebounds to $12, $13, $14. Guess what? They're not paying $15 for it, right? That's the most important thing it does. The second most important thing it does, and this is huge, is that because Roivant hasn't been de-SPACed yet, it's trading at $9.85. And we all know when a SPAC's trading at $9.85 or $9.90, it means that once it's de-SPACed, which means once it closes the SPAC deal, it's very likely going to go down. Does it go to 9? Does it go to 8.50? Does it go to 8? We don't know, right? But once it de-SPACs, it could freely trade, of course. It's going to go up. It's going to go down every day. It's going to trade like a normal stock. What Roivant doesn't want is they don't want Roivant stock to be freely trading when they announce a large premium deal for Immunovant. They don't want this because it makes them look bad. Because if they announce, and when the stock's trading at 8, and they announce a $15 or $17 or $19 deal with Immunivant, that $8 stock might go to $7 the next day. Okay. And Roivant shareholders are going to be pissed. They're going to say, this is a value destructive deal. We just lost 15%. Why'd you do this? But if they announce it now, before it gets de-SPACed, the market has no way of showing you how much value they think you destroyed. It just stays at 985. And once it de-SPACs, it will price in that value destruction. But you'll have no way of knowing how much of it was the value destruction for buying Immunivant at 15, 16, 17, or 18, and how much of the value destruction was just that it was overvalued at $10 or $9.85 here, and it wasn't able to freely trade until it was de-SPACed. So I don't know anybody at Roivant, but if you do, you should let them know this is a smart idea. And are they looking into it? I don't know, but I bet you they are. So, I don't think, by the way, if they announce that press release where they want to buy it at $15, I don't think that'll be the price they pay either. I think the special committee will, which is a charade, will say they're going to take the time to meet and discuss, and I think they'll bump it. I think they'll bump it to 17, 18, because at 17 or 18, you could say it's a 70% premium to today's trading price, which is that's concurrent with minority to majority. And they could even say it's a 30-something% premium to the D or the 13 from 1350. And I think between those two things, you probably get shareholders on board, and you won't have any kind of problem with the minority vote. I also love that sell side, and I'm guessing almost all biotech investors think that the Roivant thing is a red herring and it's dead. I mean, that's why the stock went to 940 the other day. Now, they think that there is a very low chance of a buyout, obviously, right? Trading at 940, if you think it's going to go for 16 or 17, and you only think there's a 50% chance, expected value-wise, the other 50% chance, you think this is a 0. So that's my Roivant pitch. I bought more, and I don't know, it's like a 13 or 14% position now, and I also have about 125 basis points in options, but I'm full now, and yeah, I like it. I like it. It has all the elements of every kind of thing I like, I love it. Let's see. Thanks for updating. As a new investor, it's really good to hear pro talk. I mean, I'm only a pro to the extent that this is my day job. So the term professional means that, you do this for a living. So I guess from that perspective, I'm a pro. Sometimes I feel like an idiot. Where did you see IVMT's announcement they hired a banking counsel? They announced that in the on the conference call yesterday. And if you go look at the slide presentation, which you could find on their website, you have to open the conference call. It's the second slide. In fact, I have a copy of it. Oh, I can't copy it because I have a locked account. But they hired Centerview. I think it's Centerview. See if I can find it here. Yeah, they've hired Centerview, and they hired Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen, and Katz. They're all people I know from my synagogue. You were in the 2025 spreads before, I think. Did you adjust those spreads? Yeah, Kevin, thanks for asking. It's a great question. I did. I lowered all of my IMVT spreads are now 1250 calls. I own the 1250 line, and I'm short the 20, 2250, and 25 against. I'm mostly short the 2250 and 25s. So basically, I'm long 1250s, short 2250s. And I'm short more 2250s and 25s than I am long the 1250s. But I did roll them all down. I did that over the last 3 days. Any option strategies you recommend for IMVT? I like common. In IMVT. The skew has changed a lot in the last 2 days, so you really can't get a lot of money selling the 1750 or 20 calls. But if you want to be real cute, one thing you could do is, which I did too, is you could own the common. Then you could buy a 1x2 call spread. So you're buying the January 12 calls, and you're selling 2 20s, and you're paying I don't know what you have to pay for that, 75 cents or something, 50 cents. And because you're long the common, it turns into a covered call if it goes above 20. And that trade you only lose money on that trade if it goes above 27.50. But you won't ever lose money because you're long the common against it. But it just makes it to where it was a stupid trade. Can you also please explain your tweet about the 1,000 June calls expiring? Is that a tax loss thing? I didn't really understand what that deal was. So yesterday there was a bid for June 20 calls, and there was 1,000 bid at a dime. And I ended up hitting a lot of that bid against my common now. But I didn't understand why anybody was paying 10 cents for IMVT June 20 calls. Even in my scenario where I think there's a chance they come out in the next week or two or month and they make a bid for the company, it ain't going to be at $20. So didn't make any sense to me. I thought it was somebody covering their short position in it. So not a tax thing, but somebody was short those June 20 calls. And because there's such a heavy margin associated with it, they bid 10 cents to cover them, so that they were not exposed anymore, and thus their broker let them have more margin. Can you explain your reasoning for using options? Is there any real benefit using that to over common stock? Yeah, it's a great question, Joe. So the best reason to use options, in my opinion, is when you think there is a large risk of capital loss. And in this situation, there is. So if come the fall, one of two things happen, this stock will go down and go down a lot. Okay. The first thing that could happen is Roivant comes out and says they're no longer interested in buying the company, or they can't agree with Immunovant to buy the company. If that happens, it could go down to $5, $6, $7. It really could. I don't know what the price would be, but it can go down. Okay. The second reason that could blow it up, and it could blow it up big, and I think it's unlikely, but it could happen, is if the FDA comes back to Immunovant and says you can't run any of these trials due to cholesterol issues. You first have to, give this drug to some chimpanzees and measure the cholesterol and come back to us in 15 years and let us know how the chimps are doing. Stock goes to like $2 if that happens. If you don't think there's any downside in the stock, call spreads and calls in general aren't very smart, in my opinion. You should just own stock, and you can even use margin on that stock. But of course, there's always downside in stocks. You could have a COVID kind of thing in March where the whole market goes down 50%, which is just, macro systematic risk, or you could have independent risk specific with the company. I own a lot of call spreads. What I tend to do in all my biggest positions is I have a core stock position, and then I want to be so big in it, I layer it with call spreads so that the most I can lose is the fixed amount I put up in the call spread. I've done that with Groupon. I did that with Magnachip, and I've now done this with IMVT. And with Groupon, over half of my position is delta adjusted, is in call spreads, and I'm huge in them. So the idea there would be, if I can capture that upside, if Groupon is 65 come October, it'll be enormous because of the amount of call spreads I have in October spreads. If it's 65 or even 70 in December, again, huge returns. And then finally, I don't know if it's to happen, but if somehow it's 80, I think it's 70. I have it 70, 80 spreads or 80, 90 spreads in January. I think they're 80, 90. And if that happens, if it's 90 by next January, just ginormous returns. I mean, those spreads are trading at 75 or 80 cents, and they'll be worth $10. So think about that for a second. Groupon's trading at 47. If the stock doubles in the next 7 months, I'll make 11 or 12 times my money versus just 2x my money if I own the common. And the stock could very well double by the end of January. This stock was $15, a year ago. So it's very volatile, and a lot could happen between now and the end of January. So that's how I decide, when to use spreads and when to buy and use common. Any other questions? We're still on PSTH watch. I think it's very interesting. We now are again, 3.5 weeks into this, and no press release by Ackman that the deal's dead. And the longer we go without a press release that the deal's dead, the more likely it is, I think, that the deal will happen. So no news is good news. My buddy says, I wonder if part of Bristol's defense will also include things like, we're just not very good at this to explain the major amendments and the 483 findings. I guess they'll probably call an expert who says there's no way you can control major amendments if 403 findings are normal. So my response to that would be, is you just show what Bristol Myers has done with, with drug development. And you look at the last 20 drugs they filed for, and all of them never had a major amendment and never had an RTF. And I would really focus on the difference between Yescarta and Chimera and show how they went through their FDA process and how Bristol Myers failed at it. And the incentives weren't aligned. It was in Bristol Myers' incentives to delay this filing and to delay the responses and have inadequate responses. So at the end of the day, it will come down to a judge saying, is this kosher? Did Bristol Myers skirt $6.3 billion in a fair and ethical way, or is it owed to the CVR holders, which, as the lawsuit says, was highly negotiated to bridge a gap, a valuation gap between buyer and seller for Celgene? I have my money on the CVR holders. Would you write PSTH weekly calls? You might have some time until news. No, Alexei, because you now are really close to D-Day, right? He first discussed this 3.5 weeks ago. And then he said it was not imminent, but it was weeks away. He then, last Tuesday, which was 9 days ago, said a couple of weeks. He used the word couple, which means 2. So we are way too close to either a leak, a purposeful leak, where you get a Bloomberg article or something that says Ackman close to, buying God, taking God public. And there's no reason to take in that premium now. Now is the time to actually buy premium, not to sell it. I actually covered my June, 2250 puts because I didn't want to be short vol. I actually bought 2750 30 call spreads on PSTH. July 2nd, 2750 30 call spreads. I paid like 35 cents for them. So where do we follow you on Twitter? I looked up map. I don't think that's you. This is me, but I'm locked right now. At some point, I'm going to be unlocked. So just try to follow me there and do a pending follow. And at some point when I unlock the account, you can follow me there. But as of now, I'm locked. I do let people come in if they have a long Twitter history, they have their real name, they know somebody. I have a few different things I look for. If you're any of those things, just tweet at me, @given the tweet, and request to follow me that way. And also push the button follow, obviously. And I'll check it out and I'll try to get to you. And try. Any other questions? I think we're good. All right. Well, I will be back on the next time there is PSTH news. If there's any news in IMVT, of course, with Groupon. And until then, thanks a lot. I always appreciate everybody coming on. Bye.